Thank you. It's great to be back here at DICE, and it's really exciting to be here to celebrate. The video game industry is overflowing with people who are creative and think outside the box, and it's going to be fun to celebrate tonight and recognize the achievements of some of those out-of-the-box thinkers. But sticking with the box for just a minute, NPD has long been known for tracking boxes, the retail sell-through of boxes through retail. And if you heard some of our announcements last week, we're not taking our eye off the box, but we are expanding our thinking and starting to think beyond the box. So for about the last 2 years, we've actually been, in addition to tracking the retail sales, we've been tracking the sales or the consumer spend on acquiring content through emerging channels. We are looking at used games, digital downloads, add-on content, microtransactions, subscriptions, and rentals, and social network games. And what we found when we released our initial estimate of 2011 figures is that in addition to the $9.3 billion that went through retail cash registers in 2011, which was down about 8%, there was an additional consumer spend of about $7 to $7.3 billion in all these other areas of monetization. So what that really accounted for, and again, this is just looking at content, this doesn't include hardware sales or accessories, is that in 2011, the spend on those other areas of content did help mitigate the decline that we saw at retail. So we saw that content spend was about 2%. So when we initially started taking this out to clients, we heard, this is great, this is exactly what we need to see, but we need to see it in other territories as well, because this is an increasingly global business that is being enabled by digital distribution. And in thinking about the key territories that people wanted to see, we heard, we really want to see it everywhere, but if you have to define where to start, we'd really like to start looking at 3 primary European countries, and that's the UK, France, and Germany. So we packed our bags and we headed out to Europe. And in October, we started fielding a monthly survey to assess the consumer spend on all those other areas of content acquisition in the UK, France, and Germany. And while we're still calculating the numbers, in March, we will be able to give a cross-geography comparison with apples-to-apples definitions of the various slices of the pie across these 4 countries. So this is just mock data. As I said, we're still crunching the numbers. But what I brought to show you today is some of the consumer metrics that talk to the why behind the buy. So starting, we wanted to look at putting this in context. What does the population look like in the US versus these 3 European countries? And these 3 European countries, the population adds up to about 2/3 of what we see in the US. So how does that translate to the gaming audience? Well, our survey has indicated some incidents for gaming activity in the 4 countries, and we apply this to census data to come up with a sizing of the gaming audience. And you can see that really the incidence of gaming in the UK is highest. It's a little bit lower in Germany. But as you can see, this is how it applies to the census data and results in the total sizing of the gaming market. But one thing we were cautioned by from our clients is you can't roll these 3 countries together and have them really be any indication of what is going on in broader Europe, because what's happening in Spain or Italy, for example, is very, very different. So we're not going to talk about, for most of the rest of this presentation, we're going to talk about what's going on in these individual countries, with one exception where we will look at total European behavior again. So this slide looks at demographics. What we see is that among gamers ages 2 to 12, we see a higher incidence of gaming activity in France and the UK than we do in Germany and the US. We see a much higher incidence of gaming across ages 13 to 34 in all 3 of the European countries than we do in the US. And then that tapers off and levels off with gamers that are ages 35 or over. Now, one of the things that we heard from clients was really concerning to them is it's great to talk about hardware sales and it's great to talk about install base, but really for us to know where to place our bets with what platforms to develop for is we need to understand usage. So this slide looks at usage among owners of various devices. And you can see that it's very different by country. In Germany, the PC has the highest incidence of gaming usage than it does relative to the other 3 countries. In the UK, the video game console usage is higher than it is for the other 3 countries. App devices are more frequently used for gaming in the US than they are in the other countries. And portable gaming devices are more heavily used in France relative to the other countries. So this is some of the information that really can help people start to, especially as we build trend, understand strategically where to place their bets, whether it's from a development standpoint or a marketing standpoint or any other standpoint, really. So this looks at incidence of acquisition, physical versus digital. And physical acquisition is new game sales at retail, rentals, and used game sales. And digital acquisition is full game and add-on content downloads, social network games, subscriptions, and mobile games. And we see that the UK, similar to the fact that they have the highest incidence of gaming overall, really demonstrates the highest incidence of digital and physical acquisition, whereas France is still really predominantly dominated by new or physical distribution. Germany, if you see, is really kind of equal between physical and digital. And we believe this is being driven by the fact that they are more heavily involved with the PC as a gaming device and are participating more in full game downloads on the PC. Now, I could show you this eyesore. This looks at individual types of content acquisition by country, but some of the kids that work for me back at the office, and I feel privileged to be able to say that anyone who's 5 years younger than me or more is a kid, so take that with a grain of salt. They thought it would be more fun to show you our learnings from this data in more of a trivia format. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to have you actually call out your answers, but you can kind of mentally think, which country do I think that this result is indicative of? So first of all, I love my portable gaming devices. You were listening, thank you. Yes, we saw that France is definitely more engaged with gaming on their portable gaming devices. Gaming on smartphones? Yep, that's me. US, thank you. I need more gaming devices, more. The UK, what we found is that there is a higher incidence of multiple usage and multiple ownership in the UK relative to the other countries. I love me some downloadable content, I had to let them have some fun with this, sorry. Germany, and again, that's evidenced by that increase or that higher incidence of downloading that we saw earlier. I love downloading paid gaming apps. The UK. As in contrast, I don't mind downloading gaming apps if they're free. France showed the highest incidence of acquiring free gaming apps. So some of these learnings that we found in our data, we actually went out to the markets to see if it made sense. And we did some store visits in Germany. And the fact that we found that Germans were, relative to other countries, involved with PC as a gaming device was really evidenced in the bigger footprint for PC games that we saw at retail. Similarly, our data shows that in the UK and France, there is a higher incidence of used game acquisition. And we really saw this evidenced in the space that was devoted to that at retail as well. And we were actually in Europe last week talking to folks, and given some of the publicity that has been out about the struggles of Game, the merchandise or the retailer, we were asked, if Game goes away, where do you think that game consumer will go? Well, one of the things that this data can reveal is look at the consumer for given retailers and look at where else they're shopping. So we looked at game consumers and we said, where else did they buy software? Well, Amazon.com, eBay, and the others that you see listed here. And in fact, the game consumer was very much more likely to shop at .com websites than other consumers of other retailers. So I thought that was really interesting. And if we look at what else the game consumer is doing, we compare it against the overall UK consumer, which is in the green column, and then the game consumer is in the orange column. And we see that the game consumer is much more heavily engaged with digital full game downloads and downloadable content, slightly more engaged with acquiring paid apps. But they're pretty similar to the average gamer when it comes to acquiring free apps or playing social network games. So another area that we want to look at is mobile, because that's one of the areas that we get the most questions from clients about, and how mobile gaming is perhaps adding to the total pie or taking away from it. So we can look at mobile activity crossed against any other type of activity. So we're just showing you one here, and that's cross-portable device usage. So this is from the US, and during Q4, we saw 19% of the population used a portable gaming device, while 48% used an app device to play games. 9% of those consumers crossed over. Now, if we compare that to Europe, it's quite a bit different. And as we saw earlier, the incidence of mobile apps was lower in Europe than it was in the US. And here we see that the incidence of portable usage versus app usage was about the same at 29%. But the crossover between those consumers was about double what we saw in the US at 20%. So really what this means is, as we start to develop trends over quarters, we can develop some hypotheses and some ideas about where this is going to go in the long term. Is the adoption of the PS Vita and the 3DS going to increase that usage of the portables? Will the usage of mobile app devices just continue to grow? And what should people be placing their bets on? So staying with mobile for just a minute, we wanted to say, okay, the US has a higher incidence of playing mobile apps, while Europe is a little bit behind, or maybe just not adopting it on purpose for a reason. But what if we look at unit share, for example, total downloads, what percent are free and what percent are paid? Well, in both territories, you see that the majority of apps are acquired for free, which isn't surprising to many. But there is a higher percentage of apps that are actually paid for in Europe than there are in the US. So let's look at that in a little bit of a different way. This looks at the mobile funnel, and we'll see the US on the left and the Europe on the right. So we see 44% ownership of mobile app devices in the US among the population 2 to 69. Of those 44%, 76 are playing games on those devices, and of those, 21% are downloading free or paid apps. Comparing to Europe, we have a lower ownership, 40%, a lower trial, or a lower percent that are playing, but a higher percentage that are converting to pay. Now, what I find really interesting is if you do the math on this, multiply them all, you come out with the same number in both territories. 7% of the population is paying to download an app. But the path to get there is very, very different. In the US, we're really talking about conversion to pay, whereas in Europe, we're really talking about trial. So that has some really different marketing challenges and implications. So one more thing that we get asked a lot about is social network gaming and the long-term viability of social network gaming. As I said, we've been doing this in the US for about 2 years, and over those 8 quarters, we've seen the incidence of social network gameplay remain relatively stable from quarter to quarter. But in the last 2 months, we've seen the consumer spend on social network game start to soften a bit. Well, in the first quarter that we are measuring this in Europe, you can see the incidence of social network gaming. And in the UK, it was highest at 20%, and in France, it was lowest at 14%. And so we're still, as I said, calculating the spend numbers on all of this, but I think it's going to be really fascinating to watch whether we're going to see something similar that we saw in the US with the softening, or whether we're going to see something completely different, because these countries do behave very, very differently. So first of all, before I close, I just want to point to the email address at the bottom of this slide. If you would like a copy of this presentation, you can email Kevin Wiley at Kevin, K-E-V-I-N, .Wiley, W-I-L-L-E, @npd.com. And we've done what we've done in Europe because we listened to what folks said they needed to know, and we encourage you to keep talking to us about what you need to know for your business and to succeed in this rapidly changing and rapidly changing to global industry. And with that, I thank you, and we look forward to celebrating the successes of those that think out of the box with you tonight. Thank you.
wasn't here.